lumière du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Just off the top of my head, I could tell you the president sued New York State, trying to keep his tax returns and his financial records secret. He sued the state of California, trying to do the same thing. He sued the Ways and Means Committee in the House, trying to do the same thing. He sued the chair of the Oversight Committee, trying to do the same thing. He sued his own bank, trying to do the same thing. He sued a whole other bank. All efforts to keep his tax returns, his financial records, his banking records secret, as various legal and investigative bodies sought to obtain those records. The president has lost in court every step of the way with all of those lawsuits. But tomorrow there will be a Supreme Court case on whether the president's records have to be handed over in response to lawful subpoenas. This is the case in which the president says he is absolutely immune from all legal scrutiny, and therefore nobody can respond to any subpoena that has anything to do with him. That case tomorrow, that historic case tomorrow, is something we'll all be able to listen into live. It is the president's last chance to stop this material coming out before the 2020 election, if ever. And he really has been desperate to stop this material from coming out. He has a whole legal team that is separate and apart from all the other lawyers who represent him on other things that just works full time on trying to keep his finances and his taxes secret. This case tomorrow involves huge constitutional questions, of course, but it also means we may finally get to see the financial information the president has been fighting to keep secret for years. Here to talk about a very specific piece of it is David Enrich, New York Times business investigations editor. He's the author of Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Destruction. Mr. Enrich, it is great to see you. You're a sight for sore eyes. It's been a long time. Thanks very much for making time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So remind all of us about the part of this case tomorrow that's going to the Supreme Court that has to do with Deutsche Bank, what the subpoena is and what your reporting indicates might be in that information if it, in fact, ever did have to get handed over to investigators.
Well, I think the starting point is to remember that Deutsche Bank for the past 20 years or so has been really the only mainstream financial institution willing to consistently do business with Donald Trump and his family and his company. And the bank has made over $2 billion in loans to Trump and his companies. It currently is owed about more than $300 million by Trump. And over the course of these decades of doing business with him, they've collected reams of detailed information about not just his finances, but everything, all the materials he used to open bank accounts or to get loans or to convince Deutsche Bank loan officers that he had the money and the collateral to pay back what he was borrowing. And so there are detailed records about his personal finances, kind of a detailed map of how all of his businesses interact, what assets they have, where they've been making money, where their money is going. And of course, just as there would be in any bank, there are detailed records that show where he moves his money. If money comes in big numbers or goes out in big numbers, Deutsche Bank knows about that. And so these subpoenas, which were issued last year by these two congressional committees, seek essentially all of that information that Deutsche Bank is sitting on, including just very detailed transaction by transaction data for just anything over $10,000, for example. And it's looking for this in relation not just to Trump and the Trump organization, but a number of his family members and really all sorts of other companies that he's affiliated with as well.
Now, David, you reported in the Times and in your book that there were essentially people who were assigned within Deutsche Bank to look for signs of money laundering. And you reported that anti-money laundering experts inside Deutsche Bank repeatedly raised red flags about entities controlled by President Trump and by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Those experts told you they recommended that the bank should file suspicious activity reports with the government, flagging potential money laundering by the president. But those concerns were ignored by bank executives, by higher-ups. Obviously, that's potentially super explosive material. Would you expect that the subpoenaed material that's going to be fought over in court tomorrow would contain information about those kinds of internal deliberations related to the president?
100%. I think that's definitely one of the things that's sought by the subpoenas. In fact, there's a particular paragraph in these subpoenas, which have been made public through this court fight, that specifically asks for any information related to suspicious activity reports that the bank either the bank either filed or was kind of drawn up in draft form to file. And so these are records that the bank really has not said anything about, where we've relied on the word of one very brave whistleblower who went public to discuss her concerns about this and was punished for that. And so I think there's a very good chance that were the Supreme Court to shoot down the Trump legal argument, that very detailed information would be coming out about the suspicious transactions or the potentially suspicious transactions that these anti-money laundering officers found and what the nature of them was, who the money was going to, why they were suspicious, and importantly, why Deutsche Bank officials up the food chain decided to overrule their kind of lower level employees and say, we are not going to report this to the government, which was really, it was just an extraordinary set of circumstances. And I think this court case presents one final chance to finally hear the full story, at least before the election.
And David, this obviously is not a subpoena to the president that he is defying. I think if that was the case, we all know how that would come out. Even if he was told to obey the subpoena, he still wouldn't. He'd defy the court. We'd have a constitutional crisis. In this case, on the Deutsche Bank stuff, this is a subpoena to Deutsche Bank. If the court rules that Deutsche Bank should obey the subpoena and hand over this material, do you feel confident that they would?
Well, it's dangerous to make predictions like that, and I've been burned in the past by thinking I know how things will work out and then being wrong. In this case, my reporting and talking to people inside Deutsche Bank indicates very strongly that they will comply with this. I think they've had more than a year now to assemble the materials that are sought in these subpoenas. My understanding is they're more or less ready to do so at the push of a button were the Supreme Court to give them the all clear to do so. And so that would mean that sometime over the summer, Deutsche Bank would be delivering just troves of detailed information about Trump's records and also the bank's own internal records about the Trump relationship to Trump's bitter political enemies in Congress.
Wow. David Enrich, New York Times business investigations editor, the author of Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Destruction, which I read every word of and loved and highly recommend. David, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
It is Tuesday, the 12th of May of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot, smoked Hungarian paprika makes all the difference in the world. It does, truly. Well, it's Tuesday, the 12th of May, and Mike Flynn is still a traitor, no matter what they say. No matter what they say. And Bill Barr will be John Mitchell. And Trump and the rest of his mob entourage, including his lovely daughter, the older one. Maybe the younger one too, but definitely the older one. And both of the boys. I don't know what to do about Barron. Maybe we can put him in an icebox baby gulag. He's probably too big for it. But we'll stuff him in, maybe. I don't know. Do we take it out on Barron? Well, we certainly take it out on the older kids, because they've been part and parcel of this mob family from day one. And when I say day one, I mean, the day they were probably born, because they were groomed for it. Wow. Well, today is the day, as we're speaking right now, I believe, that Trump is pretty much going to be given the enabling acts to continue doing what he's been doing. And that's basically making the United States vacant. And what do I mean by that? Well, I've said this before. Property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. It's the first rule of real estate when you're, dealing with income property. You don't want anybody inheriting a tenant. You know how much that costs? And they just cause nothing but trouble. And even when you take care of it and use arbitrary reprisals like cutting off the water, it takes effort to do. You could do without that. I mean, come on. It's going to be trouble if you inherited it. That's why Trump can't stand anybody who's been in government since Eisenhower. Are there still people since Eisenhower? Probably not, but I'm making a rhetorical point, okay? They could have been in office they could have been working as civil servants since Lincoln. And Trump would want to get rid of them because they worked during the Obama administration and they stayed. They're obviously disloyal to me. Well, they're disloyal to you not because they were civil servants who didn't look at the president of the United States as the arbiter of how good of a job they're doing, which usually it was, I have to say, because, even the presidents we really hated, even the kind we wanted to frog march to The Hague, tended to treat, the civil servants of America as, workers and exemplars of the American ideal. Not this one, because he's a mobster. And he doesn't trust anybody who's working on the job before he got there. He can't trust them. He doesn't know who they are. All he knows is they work for the black guy, so they must have something wrong with them. So, who's the first person that Trump went and talked to after he got this Flynn thing going here with Barr? Yeah, Vlad. We took care of the Russia hoax. Vlad's patting him on the back, figuratively, of course. Yes, Donnie, we know. You got rid of the Russia hoax. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now let's talk about what Deripaska has been doing in Kentucky with your one Moscow Mitch McConnell. How about if we scale up? Yeah. That's why we don't get to have the transcripts of their talks. That's why we don't get to know about his financial records at Deutsche Bank that has already been convicted and paid big fines for doing what? Yeah, laundering Russian mob money. And when I say Russian mob money, I mean the government of Russia is a mob government, and we need to wrap our heads around that. And of course, I'm not... You listeners already know that. I mean, please. But if someone happened to stumble onto this and they're hearing it for the first time, let this roll around in the empty barrels of our brains. Rattling, rattling, rattling. And what is that? The government of Russia is a mob government run by mobsters, and that is what is happening to America. Yeah, you might say, that was always that way. Yeah, we used to call it that, but it was figurative. I'm talking about real organized crime here. I'm not talking about a guy who's just a crook. I am not a crook. Yeah, you were a dick. You were a big crook. And you had a certain organized quality to you. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the kind that says, I just want to shrink government down to the size where I can push it out of a 5-story window on Fifth Avenue. And the Supreme Court, with John Balls and Strikes Roberts, never calls a foul ball on the home team, and this might be a home run. Oh, yeah, not only just sneak past the foul pole, it went over center field because we judged it, so we just moved the field a little bit, just moved it over to the right. We moved the field over to the right a lot. And your almost foul ball is now a dead center home run. because we don't call foul balls on the home team. Never have, never will. And the ruling will only apply to those presidents who are not Democratic, black, woman, Latin, Asian. I think I said religiously ambiguous. That's me. And someone prone to advocating science to figure out what the hell is going on. Those people cannot go and push government out of a 5-story window. In fact, those presidents are not even able to save government from being pushed out of a 5-story window on Fifth Avenue, because these rules only apply, well, to Trump or a Republican of apparently a hostile foreign power's choosing. Bill Barr has an OLC memo that says, look, we got it right here. And John Roberts says, you know what? Thank God we got Gorsuch and Kavanaugh to give this 5-4 decision to give Trump the enabling acts. Man, they could even do that in Nazi Germany before it was Nazi Germany. Okay. Does history resonate? I don't know. I think it's rather discordant myself and is clanking and rattling around the empty barrels of our brains. We're hearing it with an echo. Okay, enough of these metaphors. What do we have, well, curated for you today? And we've been curing it like vintage aged meat, whatever that means. And yeah, and even though it's, you know, Chowder Tuesday, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. And oh, one other thing I need to remind folks, we do roast corn, take it off the cob so they're just, succulent kernels. And those get dropped into the chowder because we always have roasted corn in our chowders. Don't you? What is wrong with you? Are you not an American? Man, they don't call it maize for nothing. Yeah, figure out that metaphor. Anyway, it being Tuesday, and we have the chowder already, and we have everything available for you here. And then, and more, that we can store away maybe and touch upon later. It's not leftovers. It'll be fresh when we get done with it. Ha! Anyway, we do have a curated show for you today. Indeed, we do. And even though we're deluged with so much news, it's hard to parse what we can focus on. We try to here because, well, we have the knives and we have the tongs. So, damn. Trump is going to get the enabling acts today. I sure hope not. Well, he's not going to get them today. But we'll know for, pretty much the timber of how this is going to result. I presume that Ginsburg's not going to be very happy about it. I presume that. Sotomayor for sure. The rest? Well, let's hope. Kagan? Are you going to be our swing? What's going on with Kagan? Anyway, when the enabling acts come, yeah, the resistance better ramp up, or else we might go the way of, yeah, you know what, not the dodo. Though, we'll probably put in the same category when the winners write the history. Okay, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, we already touched upon, we dove pretty damn deep into the financial secrets that could be exposed from the Deutsche Bank subpoena that's at the center of the SCOTUS arguments today. If Trump's legal losing streak continues, but we don't know that. We're talking John Balls and Strikes Roberts. He only calls balls and strikes. He doesn't call foul balls, especially on the home team. Now, on the opposing team, he may not want to call a foul ball. Most likely will be a strike, and the third strike because you didn't know about the other two. Well, that's your fault. Ignorance is no excuse. On the rest of the menu, Alabama Republicans want to use federal virus aid to build a new statehouse. Yeah, instead of giving it to people in need, they need it for their statehouse, and they have their priorities in place. A GOP congresswoman says federal virus aid that might help the post office is a recipe for disaster. Yeah, well, Virginia Fox is like a fox in the hen house, if you ask me. We'll talk about that metaphor a bit, too, with 2 X's. And Republicans complain about discrimination against oil companies amid the pandemic, and UV light from the sun is making it worse. Oh, my God. Photoelectric. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Interpol issued a red notice, that's a warrant for an arrest, for Anne Sacoolas. That's the wife of that U.S. diplomat, and she's sought over the fatal UK car crash that killed British teen Henry Dunn. Well, it's about time. And Portugal is counting on drones to bolster its defenses against wildfires, not sheltering in place during the pandemic. How dare those wildfires express their freedom? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our link to our Patreon page, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. If you could afford, even in these perilous times, the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, sent to us once a month, we're able to stretch those dollars because, well, we're quantum mechanics when it comes to stretching dollars. We leave no strange quark unstretched. We're able to do that because our ability has been honed over so many years, well, going on 10 now, of Resistance Radio. So we're well prepared for when the enabling acts are handed out today. Well, when the decision finally comes down. But we'll know if the enabling acts will truly be enabled. Anyway, thank you for your generosity to those of you who have helped us pay our bills and get our newish machinery. We're still getting newish machinery and the software needed. Yeah, and that all costs. And as long as you pay, you can kind of slip under the radar, even when the enabling acts are enabled. So, thank you for that generosity. And for those of you who would like to help us, please do push that button. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple because if you go to @Netroots Radio, Tom takes care of that because he made it simple, as it should be. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of @Justice Putnam with all the complexities involved. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. And then get that linked up on social media because that's what one does. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so @CookbookWest. And probably the most important pitch in this whole pitch is pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, Tune, and iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And they're everywhere. Just look, even in the cloud. Yep, just that lone one happening to be billowing by. Look there. And I bet we're there too, among billions probably at this point. You know, when they talk about astronomical numbers, I think those numbers are too small. We need to go by banking numbers because the only kind of numbers, there are more dollars in our banks than there are stars in the sky. So we need to call them banking numbers, not astronomical numbers. We need to be able to say something that is like unfathomable, which used to be astronomical numbers. It was unfathomable. Well, we can fathom them now. The thing that's unfathomable is the amount of money that the banks have. Jeez. They probably have more stars in all the galaxies of even the unknown universes. Jeez. Banking numbers. We can't ever conceive that number. I know I can't. We better dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe. I bet people are thinking, he used to like just have a little rant, and then he'd go into these curated parts of the show. Now his rants are just going on and on and on. And what's up? Because I decided, we have a break, but I don't need to do it during the regular radio times. I suppose if we get on terrestrial radio, we will do that, and we're well honed in doing so. But for now, hey, it's organic. We're in a salon. Sit back. Have a bite. Take a sip. This first offering is by Dan Desai Martin, and they're out of the American Independent, which used to be Think Progress. What happened? Or I'm sorry, Think Progress was its own thing. That was American Center for Progress, which still exists. No, the American Independent used to be Share Blue Media. Now they're the American Independent. Republican state senators in Alabama are considering using federal coronavirus relief funds to foot the bill for a new state house. Alabama Senate President Pro Tem Del Marsh sent a wish list of priorities to Governor Kay Ivey for spending the $1.8 billion in relief from the CARES Act. Oh, you mean money from like California and New York and all the urban centers of the United States so you can prop up your little boondoggle and then blame us for being commies and socialists? Should I go on? Oh, yes, we should. And that federal funding is meant to help states deal with the current coronavirus crisis. The list included using $200 million to build a new state house, and that amount is 8 times more funding than the $25 million suggested for purchasing supplies and equipment to prepare for another outbreak. Marsh defended using federal aid meant for coronavirus relief to build himself and his colleagues new digs, saying the current state house has many issues, as you know, including mold issues. Well, yeah, with all the hot air coming out of you folks, no wonder. Droplets accumulating on the hard surfaces, and you can't ever get rid of them. So you might as well get rid of the hard surface, too. They're just thinking ahead. Marsh said that using federal aid to build the state house was not his top priority and should only be considered if there are leftover funds, after they've given it out to all their, lobbyist friends and people who helped fund their campaign efforts. If you give them money, they take a percentage and they give you most of it back. Yeah, that's how you launder stuff. Come on. Senate Majority Leader Bobby Singleton, a Democrat, told Alabama.com that he was not part of Marsh's meetings and had no idea about any priority list because Democrats are the enemy of the state. And that happens to be any state they're in, even if they're running the state. See what they're trying to do to governors who are Democratic? Yeah, take their power away. House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels House, a Democrat, criticized Marsh's suggestion, saying it is unconscionable that the legislator would spend the people's money meant to address the incredible hardships this pandemic has wrought on our workers, families, and state-on pork and pet projects. Ivey, a fellow Republican, also criticized the suggestion by Marsh for now. There are tens of thousands of Alabamians, probably a lot more, that are truly hurting, and they don't care one bit about petty political games being played in Montgomery, because she has to deal with the political ones coming out of D.C., and I'm talking about Mitch McConnell. Marsh did not respond to a request for comment. Now, let's remind ourselves, Moscow Mitch publicly complained about the possibility of federal aid going to Democratic-controlled states, preferring they go bankrupt rather than take assistance from the federal government. Cy Martin of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, just like the first one. And of course, it is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Representative Virginia Fox, Repug of North Carolina, attacked a new coronavirus relief package put forward by Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats that would help shore up the U.S. Postal Service, provide federal funding to hospitals, and help local governments that are struggling during the crisis. Speaker Pelosi wants Christmas to come early this year, Fox tweeted Monday morning, because you always tweet in the most patronizing Southern accent that you can find. And I find him right here in the old noggin. The empty brain, the barrel rattling. Oh my gosh. Instead of assessing what is already working, she's choosing to advance a new stimulus package with more irresponsible socialist stocking stuffers. Blindly throwing money at this pandemic is a recipe for disaster. Wait a second. You mean giving it to the people who will actually spend it rather than hoard it offshore? You mean those people? Don't give them any money. Because we're trying to make this country vacant for the hostile foreign power. It's much more valuable that way. According to Axios, the new relief bill would provide $25 billion to keep the U.S. Postal Service from going into bankruptcy. Well, how about if we took away the mandate? They have to fund the pension plan 75 years in the future in about 10 years. Every year, they have to meet that. And this lie that they don't make money is a lie, and Trump knows it. He doesn't want mail-in ballots, and he also doesn't like the largest public employees union around, because that's all part of the GOP plan anyway for decades. The post office is part of the Constitution. If they're going to take out another part of the Constitution, something as infrastructure as the post office, yeah, property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. Israel, also of the American Independent, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A group of 14 Republican senators and 22 Republican representatives wrote a letter to the Trump administration to complain that some banks are not making loans to the fossil fuel industry. Yeah, if you want to know what's really going on, look at what the actuaries are doing. And then look at what the military is doing. You know, like not taking any new recruits that have had coronavirus until they can figure out what the hell is going on. They accuse the financial industry of discriminatory tactics against America's energy sector and the hard-working families that support it, and asked for government intervention on their behalf. You know, UV light not only gets rid of the pandemic, apparently, but really, it's been wreaking havoc on the fossil fuel industry. Darn it. The lawmakers complain that some banks, which are able to make government-backed loans under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as the CARES Act, are not making those or other loans to coal, oil, and gas companies. Well, I'm sorry. You have to get in line behind Applebee's because they got the money. You know? Cottage Cafe in Rogue River, Oregon didn't get it. That's why they had to try to threaten to open up for sit-down service. Damn right. We want our liberty to be able to infect and get infected. Yeah, 5,000 degree hot lava is coming in my lungs. It's my God-given right to breathe it if I want to. I know it is. The lawmakers added that Wall Street's big banks, for example, should not be able to reap the benefits of participating in federally guaranteed loan programs laid out in the CARES Act, such as the Paycheck Protection Program, or the $1 trillion 13.3 Federal Reserve Facility lending programs, while simultaneously targeting American energy companies and workers. So, turn out the sun. Quit making solar panels. It's so discriminatory. It's lynching us. It's lynching us. These snowflakes always co-opt everything and make it sound like it's so bad for them. I'm sorry. You know, why don't we throw some money at the whale oil industry and all the families will support that? Please. All right, we better get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. When preparing for a date, a human might use a small spritz of cologne or perfume. And male ring-tailed lemurs also splash on some cologne to impress the females. The only difference is they secrete their own scents from glands near their wrists. And during the breeding season, the males rub the secretions from their wrists onto their tails, and then wave the tails near females. Researchers actually call this behavior stink flirting. Biologists already knew that lemurs have scent glands, and that they use them to communicate their social rank or to identify their territories. Scientists also knew that sometimes males use their scent glands as part of a dominance display against potential rivals. But nobody had really looked to see whether the females were relying on the male scents as part of their mate selection process. Nobody until Kazushige Tohara, a biological chemist at the University of Tokyo. Working at a wildlife laboratory, he and his team collected the secretions from male ring-tailed lemurs' wrist glands twice a month for several years. In an email, he described the male scent as fruity and floral. The researchers identified 3 chemical compounds in the secretions that were in higher concentrations during the breeding season, which suggested that these chemicals, all of which are long-chain fatty aldehydes, might be involved in mating and reproductive behaviors. After identifying the 3 compounds, the researchers soaked cotton balls in a variety of smelly substances, then offered them to female ringtails. And the lady lemurs spent more time sniffing cotton balls that were infused with the 3 aldehydes, especially during the breeding season. More research is necessary to be sure, but Tohara says this is the first time a sex pheromone has potentially been identified in a primate. The findings are in the journal Current Biology. While none of these 3 compounds have yet been identified in the secretions of any other primate, they have been found in lamb wool. Their presence implies that these substances might help newborn sheep recognize their mothers. And one of the chemicals also acts as a sex pheromone in 2 different types of insects, which means that these kinds of long-chain fatty aldehydes are likely used widely throughout the animal kingdom for social communication. No wonder they're often used in the colognes and perfumes we humans pay through the nose for. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1856. Workers of Melbourne, Australia, marched to celebrate a victory in the campaign to win the 8-hour workday. At the time, it was common to work as long as 12 or 14-hour days. A gold rush had brought a building boom to Melbourne. This meant long, tough work days for workers in the building trades. Frustrated by the working conditions, trade laborers began to mobilize for a shorter workday. That March, stonemasons working on public works projects, including Melbourne University, walked off the job. They wanted a reduction in their workday from 10 hours to 8. They won the 8-hour day at the same wages they had earned for the longer day. 8 hours became the standard for trade labor. From the masons, it spread to the carpenters, bricklayers, painters, and other skilled trade workers. To celebrate the masons' victory, a march was planned on the outskirts of Melbourne. The festivities included games, speeches, and even fireworks. For the celebration, a banner reading 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest declared the message of the movement. The 888s became a symbol for labor. The next year, another 8-hour procession was held on April 21st. The march became an annual tradition for labor for the next 95 years. In 1879, the day was declared a public holiday. The march reached its peak before World War I. Thousands gathered to cheer the procession of the 8-hour men. From the United States to Australia and to many places in between, the campaign for the 8-hour workday showed the power of working people.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
All ears are on the Supreme Court Tuesday as the justices hear 3 cases about whether Trump can block the release of his bank records. We can listen as the arguments are being held via teleconference, and as was the case last week, the audio is being streamed live for the first time in history. Tuesday is also a big day in the Senate as Dr. Anthony Fauci and 3 others testify before the Senate Help Committee. A New York Times article Tuesday morning claims Fauci plans to deliver a very stark warning, quoting him as saying, "The major message that I wish to convey to the Senate Help Committee is the danger of trying to open the country prematurely. If we skip over the checkpoints and the guidelines to open America again, then we risk the danger of multiple outbreaks throughout the country. This will not only result in needless suffering and death, but would actually set us back in our quest to return to normal." End quote. Oh, the White House reaction to that should be interesting. We should note that the White House on Monday finally ordered staffers to wear masks at work when not at their desks. This after 2 aides tested positive for the coronavirus last week. Donald Trump, who does not wear masks, said at a news conference that it was he who ordered the change. Earlier in the day, Trump tweeted that the fight against the pandemic is looking, quote, "much better," with numbers going down almost everywhere. But not so fast. In actuality, infections and deaths rose in some areas, with the total number of U.S. coronavirus deaths now passing 80,000. Trump also said that the U.S. is testing more people per capita than many countries, including South Korea and the UK, while ignoring at least 24 other countries, including Germany and Russia, with higher testing rates. Meanwhile, Trump walked out of his own coronavirus news conference on Monday after clashing with 2 female reporters. Weijia Jiang of CBS asked Trump why he turns testing into a global competition when people are dying. The exchange was stunning, even for those who are no longer shocked by the ugly things that constantly spew from Trump's mouth.
Said many times that the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world. And maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
Okay, anybody else? Please, go ahead in the back, please.
I have 2 questions.
No, it's okay.
But you pointed to me. I have 2 questions, Mr. President.
Next, please.
But you called on me.
I did, and you didn't respond, and now I'm calling on the young lady in the back, please.
I just wanted to let my colleague finish, but can I ask you
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
That was CNN's Caitlin Collins, who Trump stopped from asking a question before he took his toys and went home, because she paused to let Jiang follow up on her initial question. Sunday was Mother's Day, and Donald Trump spent the day sending over 100 crazed tweets, a few of them on the subject of what he's calling Obamagate. The original fake news channel Fox has been giving it the lead story treatment, and at Monday's Rose Garden presser, the Washington Post's Philip Bump asked him what the alleged crime was.
Mr. President, in one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history by far. Those were your words. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. And I wish you'd write honestly about it, but unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours.
It bears repeating that is the President of the United States talking to a Washington Post reporter. Unbelievable. Nearly 2,000 former Justice Department employees jointly called for Attorney General Bill Barr to resign over his decision to drop charges against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. In a letter posted Monday on Medium, former DOJ employees of both Democratic and Republican administrations say Barr, quote, once again assaulted the rule of law. The DOJ last week dropped its criminal case against Flynn after determining in a review that the case was, quote, conducted without any legitimate investigative basis. But, the letter reads, this explanation does not hold up to scrutiny because Flynn admitted under oath and in open court that he told material lies to the FBI in violation of long-standing federal law. The letter was organized by the nonprofit group Protect. It is election season. The Democratic Party is now planning to adopt new rules that could narrow the scope of its presidential nominating convention, possibly paving the way for either a limited in-person gathering or a virtual event. The proposed changes, which are expected to be adopted in a virtual meeting of the party's Rules and Bylaws Committee, would allow delegates to participate even if they don't attend the convention in person. Meanwhile, a special election is being held Tuesday in California's 25th district. That's the Los Angeles County seat that Katie Hill vacated. Republican Mike Garcia and Democrat Christy Smith are running in a very, very tight race. There's also a special election in Wisconsin's 7th, which is a solidly Republican district that Trump won by more than 20 points in 2016. And finally, the Department of Justice is considering whether to bring federal hate crime charges against two white men who shot and killed Ahmaud Arbery, a 25-year-old black man, while he was jogging through a suburb in Glenn County, Georgia. In a video that only recently surfaced, Gregory and Travis McMichael, a father and son, are seen shooting Arbery in the street with a shotgun and a .357 Magnum. This happened on February 23rd. The shooters were finally arrested just days ago after a huge public outcry. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, only expecting a high of 60 to 63. Today's temperature is much cooler than yesterday's, and we have quite a bit of rain that has occurred overnight. Expecting another, more than 1/10 of an inch today and tonight, with 1/4 of an inch dropping tomorrow. Cloudy with an occasional rain shower, winds out of the southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Shifting to, or from out of the east at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And, of course, bringing with it about 1/4 inch of rain. Bringing with it another 1/10 of an inch of rain. And then tomorrow, cloudy with periods of rain, highs near 60. Winds light and variable, and rainfall is going to be near 1/4 of an inch. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in Southern Oregon stands at 49 with none dead because we don't test. How do we know? Grass pollen right outside the mothership here locally is high, and the air quality index in the region is rated good at 35 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains high at 7. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.76 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. Well, you would think it'd be more than that, wouldn't you? Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 58 and sunny with coronavirus. Paris is 58 and sunny with coronavirus. Rome is 75 and partly cloudy with coronavirus. Kyiv is 53 and mostly cloudy and windy with coronavirus. Kabul is 65 with thunder in the vicinity and coronavirus everywhere. Hong Kong is 78 and partly cloudy with coronavirus fully entrenched. Tokyo is 69 and partly cloudy with coronavirus. Sydney, Australia is 56 and fair, trying to open up their country from coronavirus. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy still with coronavirus. And New York is 51 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, and still with coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Interpol has issued a wanted notice for Anne Sacoolas, the wife of a U.S. diplomat who is wanted in Britain, over a fatal car crash in a case that has caused friction between London and Washington, D.C. An Interpol red notice has been issued for the 42-year-old, the wife of a U.S. intelligence officer, charged with causing the death of teenage motorcyclist Henry Dunn by dangerous driving, ITV reporter Adam Clark said on Twitter. Interpol's website says a red notice is a request to law enforcement worldwide to locate and provisionally arrest a person pending extradition, surrender, or similar legal action. Interpol issues such requests at the request of a member country, and they are not an international arrest warrant. Interpol said it did not confirm red notices other than those listed on its website, and Sacoolas was not listed publicly. Britain's Crown Prosecution Service did not confirm the ITV report, but said in a statement that it still wanted her to stand trial in Britain over last August's car crash.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Katerina Damani of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Portugal will use long-range drones and other surveillance means to reinforce the monitoring of wildfires this summer, responding to concerns over the country's readiness to tackle forest blazes during the coronavirus pandemic. EU data shows Portugal is one of the bloc's worst-hit countries by fires every year. One of the root causes of its frequent wildfires is that parts of the country's interior are deserted, as people have left to live in cities or abroad, and the job of clearing trees and brushes is ignored, creating a fire risk. Municipalities and firefighters say that risk could have intensified during the country's lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic over the past 2 months. Well, I don't know, shelter in place and take out a few trees and some brush. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we'll meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.